हेलो एक बार वहां से बस रमेश को वहां से बुलवा दो और मुझे कर रहे मैं सुन रहा हूँ बस मैं ही कर हेलो तो बस आ जाइए हेलो हेलो इनका आवाज आ रहा है हेलो हेलो इनको आवाज क्यों नहीं आ रही हेलो इनको आवाज नहीं आ रही उसका मतलब आवाज नहीं आएगी अरे यार वहां से कोई बोलेगा मैं सुनूंगा नहीं सुनूंगा
हेलो 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 हेलो
Hello, yes, I can hear you. Hello, I can hear you. Hello.
yeah you can hear me
So, yes, I can hear you.
okay fine
Okay, friends, start podcast कर दो वहाँ से. Start कर दो. Hello, friends. Good afternoon. I'm Vineet Bharadwaj from CIR. Welcome to the webinar on CSR, the new understanding on how to promote the affirmative action. We are just about to start in another 2 minutes. I'll just request you to bear with us. In another 2 minutes, we'll all start. I'm seeing messages that we all are muted. We are just taking care. We are starting broadcast, so you'll start hearing us more. Thank you. You just wait for 2 minutes. We'll be there. Unmute unmute. Unmute all.
Muted.
Mute all है. Mute already mute है. ये mute हो जाएगा. ये तो नहीं हूँ यार. ये तो मेरा है. आपको देखना है किसको अनम्यूट करना है किसको नहीं. सब सारे अनम्यूटेड हैं. आवाज जा रही है. आपको आवाज जा रहा है. सबकी आवाज सबको आवाज जा रही है. मैं चेक करूँ वहाँ पे. आप बोलो मैं चेक करता हूँ. वहाँ पे आवाज आ रही है. देखा कोई नहीं है. कोई नहीं है. सब नहीं तो इनकी आवाज आती है लेकिन इनको भी अनम्यूट कर देगा. आपकी आवाज जाएगी उनको. ठीक.
उनकी आवाज आपको नहीं आएगी।
हाँ ओके, तो प्रेजेंटर का भी यही होना चाहिए, प्रेजेंटर की आवाज आनी चाहिए वहाँ क्वेश्चन।
तो पहले आप यहाँ से म्यूट करोगे, यहाँ पर खत्म हो जाएगा।
हाँ तो ठीक है, कमलेश also बता दिए प्रोसेस। सुन कमलेश। Good afternoon, friends. We are here today for the webinar on CSR, understanding the new understanding and how to promote affirmative action. Today we have an expert, Mr. Soumitra Chakravarti, who is the CEO of Innovation. Mr. Chakravarti created a niche in CSR and sustainability industry and established Innovation in 2008. He has strategized and implemented CSR and sustainability programs across India in partnership with various corporations and NGOs working in the field of health, environment, education, and livelihood. He is also a visiting faculty to institutions like the Institution of Directors for Sustainability, Corporate, Social, and Environmental Responsibility. He is a very eminent speaker and has participated at various events as panelist, speaker, even jury and moderator. And he's also an active partner with CI in our initiatives. Today, as the flow will continue for this webinar, will be that within say in half a minute, Mr. Chakravarti will take over and he will give his presentation. I will request all of you to post your questions in the question box tab that is provided. You can enter it over there, and from here, once the presentation is over, we'll read out the questions to Mr. Chakravarti, and he will then answer from there. This has been done basically to many times repeat questions just to avoid the repetition. We will combine the questions and read out. I'll read out from here from Mr. Chakravarti, and from there he can answer. Now over to Mr. Chakravarti.
Unmuted.
Hello friends, this is Soumitra Chakravarti. I basically head a company called Innovation, where we basically deliberate our work in the social development sector, especially in the enterprise model. I thank the Confederation of Indian Industry for partnering on a platform, and that too using the web platform as such, for deliberating on two very important aspects, that is the corporate social responsibility and the new understanding that has developed over the last few months after the enablement of the Companies Act, and how to promote affirmative action through a very active and a positive linkage between the both. So I'll take you through a bit about the snapshot of the presentation. So the webinar objectives, as we will do it today, is Introduction to the Companies Act 2013, understanding the role and scope of corporate social responsibility and affirmative action, strategizing the CSR, the corporate social responsibility for improving standard living of the marginalized, where we will intersect the line between the affirmative action agenda and the corporate social responsibility deliberation. We'll highlight some of the efforts taken by India Inc. and CII as well in the affirmative action area. We'll scrutinize companies' performance and beyond, brand building, consumer trust, and what is the way ahead, which is very important. I guess the most important part of the seminar would be to suggest and advise what is the way ahead to incorporate and integrate both the corporate social responsibility initiative agenda and the affirmative action plan. That's my name, so I'll skip it. Yeah, so just a brief about, because you should know what we do because of what we are here. We are a CSR based research consultancy. We assist businesses to support requirements of communities by designing and implementation of sustainable projects, and the word sustainable is very important, both in the matters of financial sustainability for the projects as well as environmental sustainability is concerned. And we ensure quality and functioning of the organization value chain. Some of the USPs what we have in our company is we are the Asia's first proposal research laboratory makers. We carry out primary and secondary research by initiating an implementable model. Basically, our models are always enterprise related. Some of the sector experts carry out innovative sustainable project models as well. And we obviously incorporate a lot of analysis tools and techniques for that. So here is where the last slide in this in this webinar, as far as Finovation is concerned, because we place ourselves in this ecosystem of corporate social responsibility. If you look at it, on one of the Venn diagram represents on one of the globular circles it's sustainability, CSR policy and community. The other one is social ecology with Finovation in between. And both of these, if you realize, it relates to both businesses and shareholders. Now, why specifically shareholders? Because when we talk of business, we talk of stakeholders. So if you look at it, all the stakeholders are involved in the process, and businesses and shareholders have been separated. But that's where Finovation places itself in the CSR ecosystem. Okay, now exposure to CSR. Especially speaking, corporate social responsibility has got two perspectives as per my understanding. One is the global perspective, and one is the India perspective before the Companies Act and the India perspective after the Companies Act. Corporate social responsibility is a brief of the history. It was coined in 1953 by the publication of Bowen's Social Responsibility of Businessmen. In 1960s, ambit expanded, suggesting beyond legal obligations and companies had responsibilities towards the social fabric. In 1990s, companies started integrating social environmental concerns within their business operations. And this is what exactly is the global perspective. The global perspective does not tell you that it is a percentile of the profit that you invest in social investment after you attain the profit is what corporate social responsibility is. In fact, the global definition of corporate social responsibility is that it is the process in which you make the profit by addressing the triple P approach, where you talk about economics, you talk about environment, and you talk about social relevance of the projects. Now, these are some of the definitions, concrete definitions if you need to know. The OECD and the UN are quite good, but the smartest of this all is the European Union definition, which says the responsibility of the enterprises for their impact on the society. This is the smartest and the most adhered definition in the industry. So CSR is basically how corporations make 100% of their profits, and not only how they spend it. A good business for good society today and tomorrow, a matter of individual and institutional ethics, and this is where I'll come to corporate citizenship. It's not a repair center for capitalism for sure. You have to understand that by doing CSR, you cannot undo the damage that you do to the environment and to the social fabric while attaining the profits. So if you are investing, for example, in eradicating child labor, about 5% of your net profit, but your garment manufacturing unit has child labor employed in it, where it is contradictory in nature, and this is not the real definition of corporate social responsibility. One very important aspect is it is not just about compliance, it is about going beyond it. So anything in compliance is not CSR. It is beyond the compliance is what goes into CSR. I'll explain it in detail in Schedule 135. Corporate social responsibility, the India perspective. So basically, the pre-independence era saw a lot of push from not only the father of nation but other leaders as well for the businesses and the private industry to contribute certain percentage of their profit or to do some social good. But it was basically a trusteeship movement. Post-independence, if you look at it, the third point, the PSUs and the government-led initiatives played prime role in social development sector. So Basically, they took it up at level 1. It is the public sector units and the government of India which actually pushed people for investments in social sector. Post 1991 post liberalization area, the local players were motivated because now they were not only local players, they were slowly becoming global players. And as the global standards came as a preset on them, they had to adhere to certain global standards of corporate social responsibility adherence. So these are some of the definitions. In Europe, we call it corporate citizenship. You can read out the definition. The difference is that it is basically a very individual top leadership, top-down approach which works in Europe. Therefore, you call it a corporate citizenship. There is a corporate responsibility which is basically in North America, which is discussed, where corporates do not separate social responsibility as something auxiliary. They actually incorporate social responsibility within the corporate responsibility and feel it that way. The third is the prevalence of this definition is in Asia because we are emerging markets. So therefore, a company's sense of responsibility towards community, environment, ecological, social in which it operates. Basically, we have not integrated social within the corporate responsibility right now. We integrate social as a separate unit altogether. Therefore, this is coined as corporate social responsibility. Yeah, so challenges to which CSR is a solution. So some of the difficulties that we face, some of the challenges that we face when CSR is a solution, where we can provide a solution through CSR, is increase in inequality between the private sector and the communities. So what is happening is, because of this growing GDP-centric mechanism and mindset that we have, we tend to look at our profit scales much more than the disparity that we cause into the economics of the society between the well-nourished and the well-flourished, and the not so well nourished and the not so well flourished, both in financial and social capital. This unrest, this discomfort, this dichotomy in two levels is causing the human societal cycle to get disbalanced, which leads to more societal unrest and humanitarian crisis. Also, you have to remember that in case of a humanitarian crisis and social unrest, businesses cannot flourish. Low consumer capacity can never drive businesses within the local economy. Plus, the environmental issues and the public health issues are some of the other aspects that you have to fight with. These are the challenges which you have to adhere to. So CSR now, through the Companies Act 2013. So what does the Companies Act 2013 basically enunciate, and how do we now interpret CSR? So one, we discussed about the global aspects of corporate social responsibility. Now what we're going to discuss is the Companies Act 2013 and how it proceeds thereafter. So the essence of Section 135, this is not Section 135, but this is the essence of Section 135, what comes out, the gist. The government is trying to tell you that it's no more charity, not philanthropy, not giving. So you don't do a favor to the community by doing something for them. So don't show it like that. If not rupee measurable, it is not CSR. One of the very, very important aspects, and I think it was needed for a long time, that if it's something that is not measurable, is not manageable. So they have made it mandatory, they have made it rupee measurable, and if it's not rupee measurable, it is not CSR. So no good thoughts. You have to actually pin down the amount that you're investing into it. So activities can be considered for CSR expenditure as listed in Schedule 7. If you're doing CSR, say it loud. So the government gives you ample opportunity to bloat it up. So you can actually expand your views, you can go to the media, bombard it. There's already a media explosion all over the country. You can just take advantage of it. And what you spend should add up to 2% of your PBT. This is profit before tax. I'll come to the deliberation of profit before tax a couple of slides later. And the whole idea is to create an enabling atmosphere and a culture of doing for the society. That's it. The companies have to own up to the responsibility that they belong to. So the history behind the companies bill, India is the first country to quantify the mandate for sure. Argentina, Brazil, and some other countries have made the reporting mandatory. Bill was first introduced in 2008, again introduced in 2009. The Companies Bill 2011 was again tabled in 2011. The Act replaced the Companies Act 1956, came into force on 12th of September 2013, and on 27th of February 2014, the MCA stated the Section 135 of the Act, which deals with CSR. So that was the history. What are the eligibility criteria? If your annual turnover is 1000 crore or more, net profit or 500 crore or more, or net profit of rupees 5 crore or more. The net profit definition is as per Section 198, subsection 5, which says net profit to be calculated as profit before tax as per the books of accounts and shall not include profits arising from branches outside India. So your investments, which are outside India and are drawing you profits, not 2% of that, but the profits that arise from the businesses established and operating within the Indian boundary. The companies must state 2% of its average net profit. I've already discussed this. Why I'm discussing a bit about corporate social responsibility is the fact that the topic is to align corporate social responsibility and how can this help in promoting affirmative action. So my main agenda is towards affirmative action, but the lead up to affirmative action is through corporate social responsibility. So implementation process, how you have to process your mechanism. The board members form a CSR committee. The CSR committee drafts a CSR policy for the corporation. Identification of CSR activities and target beneficiaries are done by this committee. You evaluate whether you want to partner with a civil society organization or you want to go yourself. Implementation of the CSR initiatives, and the most important, the reporting within this financial year. These are some of the schedules. I will not go through the details of it, but this is basically what Schedule 7 says. It highlights 12 or 11 criteria under which your project should fall into to be considered by the government within the 2% ambit of investment in corporate social responsibility. So, for example, eradicating hunger, you have a detailed poverty, malnutrition, promoting preventive healthcare and all that stuff. You have promoting education, you have promoting gender equality, which is one of the most important and required statistics, and I can't be less thankful to the government to incorporate the same into it. You have ensuring environmental sustainability, which I think is a debated topic now within the emerging and the developed nations, since climate change is taking its central place. Protection of national heritage, measures of benefit for armed forces, training to promote rural sports. We all know what the state of sports in the country is, and I think it's a good push by the government in order to encourage the corporations to invest more in sports. Contribution to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, which I don't know is a very good idea or not, but it's better if you can actually implement a project. The government also wants you to do that. But for contingency measurements and contingency times, they have kept PM Relief Fund in it. Contribution of funds provided to technology incubators, especially academic institutions. So all these technology accelerators and incubators, this is a good initiative for social enterprise startups. So if you're looking at a social enterprise technology startup and you want yourself to be incubated or accelerated, these are some of the good aspects that you have a scope within the ambit of Schedule 7 to be invested upon. You have rural development projects. The recently added areas are you can actually incorporate slum area development into this. So a lot of urban housing issues can be brought into CSR. Then you have the Swachh Ganga Fund, the Clean Ganga Fund, which is again one of the major aspects of this government. You have the Swachh Bharat Kosh, which is the sanitation drive. The contribution to this, as per the amendment, GSR 741E, you can actually invest in these schemes as well as take benefit of the 2% ambit. Now this is the most critical slide, what I would call the establishing the linkage between corporate social responsibility and affirmative action. So a lot of you must be thinking the objective is to address affirmative action. Why is this man talking so much about corporate social responsibility? It is very important for us to understand that corporations, to enable affirmative action, has to adhere to socially responsible behavior. So you cannot alienate corporate social responsibility from affirmative action. Vis-a-vis, you cannot alienate affirmative action from corporate social responsibility. So let's start with corporate social responsibility a bit. Affirmative action, sorry, correct. Employment equity in Canada. So affirmative action in India is basically known as employment equity in Canada. It has been long in operation. They're quite ahead. Basically, it is to engage employers to employ practices to increase the representation of 4 design groups: women, people with disabilities, aboriginal peoples, and visible minorities. Affirmative action in USA focuses on issue and education, similar. Positive action in UK, promoting of people based to belonging to non-majority identity groups like the workplace, educational institutions, and positions in society. Right. So what is affirmative action? This is a double A concept. So what is actually double A? You have the AAA, AA ratings on the batteries. So if you can use AA rating of a battery onto this concept, let me tell you, 85% of India's poverty population will be addressed by this mechanism. So affirmative action is an action favoring those who tend to suffer from discrimination or positive discrimination. You have to understand this very, very clearly. For people of a certain caste, gender, sexual orientation, race, or ethnic background. It reverses a long-standing discriminatory tendency in the society. And we cannot deny the fact that even today, as we are sitting in this web-enabled platform, and I'm talking to you in this dialogue, there are parts of this country where the backward communities have to travel for 20 kilometers a day to fetch a bucket of water because the 18 wells in the village are exclusive property of the upper caste people. So all this GDP, all this technology revolutions take a backseat when you visit such places. And when we go to such places, we get shocked to the extent that how much is required. So what happens is the urban population debates the fact that whether affirmative action is required, whether reservation is required. And when you go to these places, you feel how much it is required. So the conditions change and the perspectives change. So affirmative action. Now different approaches to affirmative action. So recruiting employees or providing opportunities in the recruitment process for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities, procuring from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe vendors, offering solutions to address the need of the challenges to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities. Now, affirmative action through CSR. This is very important. Now, these are some of the aspects on the left-hand side. You can see affirmative action. On the right-hand side, you can see affirmative action through CSR. So, implementing CSR activities as per Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, but targeting socially backward scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities as the beneficiary groups of those initiatives. That's what CSR and this Companies Build does it for you. It envisages you to get into the project, looking into the beneficiaries and then addressing the issue of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes within these communities. So affirmative action in India. Reservations specify that a proportion of the minority group must be selected for education and job and other benefits regardless of them being underqualified. Reverse discrimination. Justification of reverse discrimination is somewhat ambiguous based on retributive justice. So now you have to understand what the constitution makers thought. The constitution makers have proclaimed by incorporating various provisions in the Constitution of India indicating the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe, and by and large backward in comparison with the other communities in the country. As I spoke to you, how much ever we debate the discriminatory perspective of reservation, we cannot deny the history of discrimination and social injustice been done to these communities and is going on till date. You still open the newspaper and you still every day see an incident of atrocity, of violence or seclusion against any community or an individual from these communities, especially the Dalits. The case study. Now, Swabhiman. Now, this is a hypothetical case study which we have understood. We have taken a person, an individual from a background, and we see what happens to it. So, if the current affirmative action initiatives are to be enforced, then just look at the dichotomy. This person belongs to the SC community. Occupation is a manual scavenger. Education, person is illiterate. House, not concrete, and children too. Now, what are the schemes that are available under which this person should have benefited? Now, self-employment scheme for liberation and rehabilitation of scavengers, Indira Awas Yojana, Mahatma Gandhi Narega, Atal Pension Yojana, Jan Dhan Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, Rashtriya Swasth Bima Yojana, Indira Gandhi Matritva Sahyog Yojana, Integrated Child Development Services, and Swavlambhan, among others. But you and I both know, sitting in this room, that these benefits are not going and being transferred to all these individuals. The question is, she couldn't benefit. This person could not benefit from it. Why? Now the challenges. Now the answer to the question why is the challenges that they face. So lack of awareness on the welfare schemes. There are hundreds of welfare schemes. Go to a government, go to an institution and tell, do you have a scheme for a scheduled caste and scheduled tribe? They'll say, yes, there are 5 schemes. These are the benefits. These are the schemes. These are the eligibilities. But how much membership of that community, how many people in that community are actually aware of such an initiative is the question. Now, so the first is lack of awareness. If you're not aware of your fundamental right, you do not exercise your fundamental right. That's how simple it is. So the discrimination continues to occur in many different open, covered, subtle ways despite Constitution abolishing it under Article 17. Increased atrocities against the SC/STs, lack of political will. Now, however much the political fraternity contemplates and pressures and pushes for the SC/ST agenda, when they are in power, it is relatively less a push, and therefore the political will is all the more less. And you have to understand, the political will comes up to a point of formulating a policy, but it should extend from formulating a policy to engaging in the policy, and that's what is not happening. No participation is happening in that policy formation. So lack of opportunities for education and employment, for which the reservation is basically a mandatory work. Low representation in public services and higher judiciary. It can be debated, but it's a fact. Increase in backlog vacancies due to lack of proper mechanism. Now what has happening is, due to this reservation, you cannot fill up these seats with upper caste people or general category people. So a lot of backlog is happening, because what is happening is at the fundamental level of education, affirmative action is not taking shape. Therefore, the discrimination is increasing, and people with aptitude are not able to come ahead. They have usually, the financial portfolio is very weak. They have small land holdings, they're landless laborers, low productivity, high incidence of migration, lack of vocational skills, financial constraints for entrepreneurship. There are a lot of schemes for entrepreneurship, but most of them lack social capital and crude capital, and therefore the eligibility criteria don't get filled up, and the entrepreneurship takes a backseat. Complicated nature of financial institutions, although there are provisions to the banks to provide certain structures to the SC/ST communities, but how much the banks flex their muscles in order to give it is a question and can be debated about. Low impact of affirmative action by private and public sector, and that is where the next slide leads up to. The private and the public sector, what it has got to do as far as affirmative action is concerned. Now, these are some of the data which tells you a different story. Now, if you look at the 2011 chart, it tells you about the scheduled castes is about 16.6, rural is about 18.5, urban is equal to 12.6%. If you look at the scheduled tribes, you see 8.6 is the total, rural is 11.3, and urban is 2.8. Now, these are some of the states, and these are some of the color codes that you see. The red is the highest intensity, and that's Punjab, where you see. Next is the blue. You can see HP. You can see West Bengal. Next, you can see the yellow zones, which is the max in the whole map. So this is the density in which the population of SCs is distributed across India. And this tells you a large picture. This tells you that you cannot be state specific in your focus. You have to be centrally focused. As a corporation, you have to be centrally focused. You can go anywhere in the country and you will find the presence of the community. All that you have to do is to focus on the benefit of this community while designing your programs. The concentration of SCs, these are some of the charts. Poverty ratio for social groups. In rural areas, scheduled tribes exhibit the highest level of poverty of 47.4%, followed by scheduled caste 42.3%, and other backward classes with 31.9%. Against 33.8 for all classes. Just look at these figures and you'll understand what I'm speaking. Why am I speaking, and why is this webinar today relevant? You will realize that this data tells you a different picture of when you're sitting in Delhi, Bombay in our air-conditioned offices, where we don't realize what is living without power, what is living without water, what is 20-mile walk for one bucket of water means. We just open our tap and we get free access to water. It is difficult for us to imagine, but this data tells you that get out of that reality of virtual reality and come into the real world and see how people survive. In rural Bihar and Chhattisgarh, nearly 2/3 of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are poor. Just imagine the situation. Northeast, the lesser we talk, the better it is. Manipur, Odisha, Uttar Pradesh, specifically northeastern states, have the poverty ratio of these groups, which is more than half of the total population. The rural and the urban, right? Now, just look at the graph, what it says. The divide between the rural and the urban poverty percentage among the social groups, how it works. So you have the rural 93, 94, and you have the 11, 12. Just compare the data and see the increase, how it has folded. The poverty ratios have gone desperate in this area. Just have a see on both the graphs and look at how it compares to the sine curve. If you look at the overall population on both the charts, you will see the discrimination of work wherever it is happening. You will see what it basically indicates to you. Now, the total SC population. These are some of the states, the top 5 and the bottom 5 according to the census 2011. The total SC population, you can see Punjab leading the way, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Tamil Nadu. At the bottom in Gujarat, Assam, so and so. If you look at the ST population, you will look at Lakshadweep. But one of the factors of Lakshadweep is it's a very sparsely located, very sparsely populated area and majorly tribal population. You will see Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh as the major contributors. Total SC/ST population, top 5 and bottom 5, major states having population of 10 million and above. So these are highly populated states. Of the highly populated states in SC population, you see it's Punjab, West Bengal, again the same frequency, but in ST population, now look at the difference. It's Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and Gujarat. Some of the states have started boasting about getting into good GDP figures. Some of the states have started boasting about getting into development agenda. But look at the real HDI. Look at the population strength, and if 85% of this population is below poverty line, you know the HDI requirement of this area. So affirmative action and the India perspective. So affirmative action in India is basically divided into two groups. One is the government functionality, the other is the private and the public sector functionality. Now affirmative action as per the government, I'll run through this because I want to concentrate more on the private sector agenda. So scheduled caste, you have a reservation percentage, you can see on the screen. Government schemes, some of the schemes which is there, all these schemes actually if implemented right and if the community beneficiaries had an access to these schemes, I can bet for and vouch for it that the data that we see today and the position and the status that we see today would have been much different had a sufficient amount of awareness been provided to these schemes, to these beneficiaries under these schemes. There's some of the most schemes and it covers basically everything. It covers your finance, it covers your housing, it covers your environment, it covers your training, finishing schools, your employability, your livelihood, your water sanitation, everything. But what are the challenges that happens? So the challenges to these schemes, which were huge in number, is one is awareness, we have already discussed, accessibility to the schemes, lack of monitoring and evaluation. Very important, the decentralization of the policies have to take place. You cannot make a policy and afford to just operate it from Delhi or Bombay. You need to address the issue right where it exists. And that is very important for us to understand that the issue lies on the ground and not at the center of the policy making places. So it's good that you have the policies, but you have to decentralize in a way that the policies get implemented and the beneficiaries get that benefit out of the decentralization of the policy. Address concerns of financial institutions for implementation of provisions. One of the major aspects that we have seen is the provisions have been made, the guidelines by the ministries and the Reserve Bank have been provided to the banks, but the banks seldom actually flex their muscles to give those benefits. It has to be made sure that if such a scheme exists, the banks have to be forced to execute to a certain percentile these schemes that are available to them. And the lack of social capital. You see, the community that works, that operates in this domain has a very weak social capital. Because of the nature of the lack of social capital, it's very difficult for them to build access to the financial institutions. And this leads to a dichotomy where the policies are there, but the benefits are not showing on the ground. Now, affirmative action in the public sector, it's something that we all know, but I'll still go through it a bit. You have the direct recruitment on all India basis, open competitive test. You have direct recruitment by not conducting written competitive exam. The principle of reservation of SC/ST should generally be suitably applied to extent possible. To work charge posts to extend those required for emergencies like flood relief, accident restoration, and other works. Post filled by promotion through limited departmental competitive examinations, post filled by promotions made by selection, and post filled by the basis of seniority subject to fitness in a group ABCD posts. Okay, the comprehensive presidential directive incorporating all important instructions on reservations of SC/STs was issued by the DPE to all administrative ministries department concerned on 25th April 1991 for formal issuance of the same to CPSEs. You have to understand that the reservation of the OBC was made effective 8/9/1993. These are the percentage under group A, B, C and D and the percentage of scheduled caste and other backward classes, how it is bifurcated, and you can go through it. Affirmative action, now this is the most important part. Affirmative action and private sector. Um, in the last CII conference, it came out that there were certain schemes were discussed. A good topic was debated, and I give specific accolade to the chair, uh, Mr. Bharat Ram, who actually chaired the meeting, who started a debate by saying, what is the fight between meritocracy and reservation? The private sector has this long-standing debate that aren't we going to compromise on merit if we actually get onto reservations and give specific advantages to a specific community? My answer to them is, you can't start a race by just putting two people from different backgrounds on the starting point at one time. You got to understand the kind of history that they belong to. You got to understand the hardship that they have went through to reach at the starting point to start the race. Both have to be standing at equilibrium to start the race at the same point at the same time. So what happened is, in 2006, Dr. Manmohan Singh appealed to the India Inc. to incorporate affirmative action policies to diversify workforce. There was a certain element of debate which came in that the government is going to enforce reservation through affirmative action within the private sector, which was debated and was not enforced at the end of the day. Industry bodies like the CII actually responded to the PM's call and outlined basic criteria for affirmative action. That was a very good thing that they did. They actually drafted a policy. They responded to the PM's call. The DPE guidelines on CSR and human resource for CPSEs were released on 2010. The NVGs were established by Ministry of Corporate Affairs in 2011, which was later adopted by the SEBI. Now, according to Partners in Change survey in 2011, only 9 point. Now, this is the reality. Let's see what private sector is doing. Let's hold the mirror to ourselves and let's see how beautiful we look. Only 9.5% of the companies have affirmative action policy. Ironical, tragic, but true. 67% doesn't have a formalized policy, and 23% did not have a policy at all. The Tata conglomerate incorporated affirmative action focusing in 4 areas of development, employment, employability, entrepreneurship, and education. This is one of the institutions where they have a separate affirmative action agenda. They have a separate affirmative action policy for their community, and I'll discuss this case study a bit later. The CII initiatives are for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. So now some of the objectives that CII achieved, because I primarily think that as a business group, as a business foundation, as a club of the elite businesses in India, CII has started moving towards the direction. Although it's a long way off, but it has started moving towards the right direction, towards incorporating the affirmative action agenda within the CII gambit. And that is the sole reason why I am talking to you today, sitting, and they have a webinar specifically dedicated to the affirmative action agenda. So what have they done? They basically trained 32,922 candidates from the SC/ST community. They provided scholarship, established skill development center, contributed to improvement of government primary schools in 104 districts, which is a huge job. Provided employment 24%, 16% in eastern, western, 22% in northern, and 16.2% in the southern region respectively. Offered training in entrepreneurship development programs. These are some of the works which CII did by itself. Now, these are some of the work that CII did with some partners in place. So, Infosys STP program, CII finishing school with the Symbiosis in Pune, the labs training program. You can see a number of beneficiaries through it. CII and Tata Communications have partnered together with Ahmedabad's Entrepreneurship Development Institute to train 270 SC/ST youth in fundamentals of entrepreneurship. HUL has a written policy statement on affirmative action in the workplace. So another example, ITC engages in affirmative action interventions such as skill building and vocational training. But what are the challenges that the private sector faces? What are those a couple of challenges that the private sector is getting resistant about? So this is lack of formalized policy. We all corporations, including us, we do not have a formalized majority of us do not have a formalized affirmative action policy. Now, because of the CSR mandate, we are making ourselves aware of the CSR policy and we are incorporating it. But we are still not giving enough attention towards the affirmative action agenda. Lack of formalized policy, lack of participation, risk of unionization. One of the reasons why organizations do not carry out a census on the backward communities within their employee mechanism is that they fear that there will be a unionization of the fact. Lack of will to conduct, yeah, that's what I spoke about. No incentivization for vendors. Now, one of the things that some of the corporations does is they have a procurement mechanism. They set a procurement mechanism. For example, they say 20% of our procurement will be done from vendors of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and OBC community from the backward. There's no entrepreneurship support. Now, the private sector usually has debated the fact that the entrepreneurship support will be given by the banks and the financial institution of the government. But it's sad to see that the private sector is ready to incentivize entrepreneurship efforts when it comes to startups, when it comes to tech startups, when it comes to manufacturing startups, but they are not very keen for specifically with entrepreneurship efforts from the backward communities, especially with the kind of discrimination that we are talking about. Now, limited progress on what is said and what is incentivized. So, uh, conferences, webinars, fair enough, good enough. But what goes back, so what you take after the webinar, go back to your desk, and what you do with it is basically what matters the most. But often it is seen that that is not something that is incentivized and is spoken the most. Affirmative action and CSR. Well, the linkage. Now, why and how should CSR link up with affirmative action? So the challenges at present, what we do is prevalence of economic inequality due to lack of inclusive development, rising disparity, constant friction between the socio-economically empowered and the left out sections of the society, absolute top-down approach. Whereas what is required is a total bottoms-up approach. The top has to just decide what to do. The bottom has to implement such. The bottom has to get the effect. So if you are a CEO of a company and if you are a board member of the company, it is your responsibility to ensure that the policy is in favor of the beneficiary at the bottom of the pyramid. But if you are at the bottom of the pyramid, you should also know the rights and you should be aware of the policies that benefit you the most because of the policy implementation process from the top. Now, what are the solutions? Now, affirm actions to address challenges of marginalized communities, rational, feasible, justifiable actions and initiatives, incorporating affirmative action within the CSR policy. Now, just look at an example. You want to go and incorporate a project in a specific area. You want to implement a project under Schedule 7, Section 135 of the Companies Act, and you want to implement that project. One of the basic things that you'll need is to carry out a need assessment survey. Your need assessment survey can highlight and come out with the data of what is the beneficiary strength of backward communities in that area. And you can concentrate more through the Schedule 7 project in areas around your operational areas which have concentrated marginalized communities prevalent in those areas. So CSR implementing affirm actions leading to improved standard of living for the backward communities. Now linking, how do you link both of them? Generating awareness among the members of the historically marginalized communities in a geographical area. So you can incorporate and generate more awareness about the schemes, the programs that are available and make the communities empowered in the real sense of their rights. Providing educational facilities, providing assistance on health, enhancing entrepreneurial and employability skills, employing trained workforce of SC/ST communities at various levels. And remember, these all can fall under Schedule 7 of your Section 135. So your CSR agenda can actually line up with the affirmative action agenda. The benefits. So what happens is you enable an atmosphere for companies to engage in social development with backward communities. CSR and affirmative action can be a concept that can travel beyond backrooms. And because you're talking about corporate social responsibility in the boardrooms, if you take backward community integration into it, you take the affirmative action agenda into the boardroom mainstream. CSR and affirmative action can now be a part of the company's core business strategy. CSR seen as a tool for brand building, customer outreach, employee engagement, and feel-good factor through value chain from internal mechanisms to the consumer who picks up the final product. Why affirmative action and CSR? So why? Why do we require it? So these are some of the comparatives that we have drawn. So one of the comparatives is reducing inequality, reaching out to the suppressed, providing education, jobs, benefits, eradication of poverty. That's a long-term goal, small steps to a giant step for mankind. Empowerment of marginalized communities, opportunities for economic growth. What is the future? So why get into affirmative action? Why do affirmative action at first place? Why can't we just leave it alone? The reason why you can't leave it alone is that equitable distribution of income has to take place in future. Sustained accessibility has to happen. Improved standard of living has to happen. Increase local trade and higher capita income to the backward communities has to happen. Infrastructure development has to take place. Social safety nets for the poor and backward communities has to strengthen. Creating a balanced workforce mix, which is a very important requirement, and the corporations can play a large role in it. Protecting interest of minorities, supply value chain management, restoration of maintenance and maintaining peace in the future, ensuring social security for all. If you remember in the first slide, I discussed about the equilibrium, maintain the equilibrium. The anticipated impact of affirmative action through CSR. So the short term are increased investments, increased household income, access to health care, higher enrollment of marginalized children in schools, improve access to water, higher agricultural production. The long term, increased opportunities to marginalized, eradication of poverty, improved health care, universal education, reduction of health care, food security for all. And these are some of the more short term and the long term. You can go through the slide. The way forward. Now, these are some of the things that we have to know. What is the way forward? You need to incorporate affirmative action in organizational policy and CSR policy right now. The CSR and affirmative action can be viewed as an opportunity to invest, establish trust, and interact with the target community. You need to align your CSR activities with the broader national goals with major focus on inclusive development and especially backward communities. Explore partnership with CSOs if you want, since there are some of the brilliant civil society organizations working with the backward communities as such. It is important to create solutions and to process that improve India's HDI ranking. Some of the states are boasting about their GDPs, but they are diminished as far as HDI rankings are concerned. So what do you actually consider development, or what do you consider inclusive development has to be thought about? Stringent implementation of CSR initiatives with higher SC/ST population and marginalized communities. Provide smart solutions to Indian villages to reduce burden on Indian cities. These are more some of the other aspects. So mobilizing, empowering SC/ST communities, providing collateral-less financial services to SC/STs, focus on developing sustainable processes rather than investing in assets, communicate CSR policy not only to showcase corporation CSR achievement but to create goodwill to the stakeholders. So that will be it. I from the bottom of my heart, I thank my team, the members of the team. You can see it below. I think this wouldn't have been possible to put such a huge amount of information after research without the help of this team. So I thank my complete team, and I thank every member who's attending the webinar right now for attending the webinar. And if I can get across to Vineet, then Vineet, you can start with the questions if you're ready.
Thanks, Mr. Chakravarti. We are ready with the questions. Just a second. We have a few questions. One, Mr. Priyato Sood is asking, what is the penalty if any company does not spend the CSR expense?
Okay, I'll answer it specifically. The penal provisions are provided within the section itself. You have to understand the nature of the policy, and the act is not that if you don't report, the nature is that if you don't report, the penal provisions come into play. It is comply or explain. So if you don't comply, it's fine. But if you cannot substantiate your non-compliance to the act without a substantial reason enough, then the penal provisions come into place. The penal provisions start from 25,000 to an imprisonment up to 3 years, not exceeding 5 lakhs for the individuals who are a part of the signatory mechanism of the CSR policy of the company. That way.
Okay. Then there is a question from Mr. N.K. Chandan, who is from Dicky. I think that's a question more for CII in terms of the entrepreneurs, etc. And I'll request, what we'll do is I'll ask my colleague Karunesh Rai to write to Mr. Chandan and take his query directly, because it has more to do with CII rather than it has more to do with CII, and we'll handle it ourselves.
No problem.
The next question is, in fact, since the program started a bit late, so there are some of the questions and statements are about a webinar only. A lot we have one from Kavita Purva Verma. A lot has been talked about SC/ST, but as per the report on disability 2011, persons with disabilities up to 50%, which is 15%, which is as good as a minority group. Hence, disability also needs to be taken up as a cross-cutting issue before it becomes alarming. Mr. Chakravarti, for want of time, I'm just combining a few questions. Mr. Chandan has sent his congratulations, and so have a couple more. Uh, how government will supervise whether every company is spending on CSR 2% or not? That is Sunita Pachar.
Okay. As far as the disability part, I'll just like to inform Ms. Kavita that yes, most of the corporations, those are enabling the mechanism of affirmative action within the policy framework, are incorporating disability as a component also. So they are not diverting from the affirmative action agenda away from disability. They are in fact the policies of some companies that I have visited upon, including the Tata, they've incorporated CSR, the policy of disability, and people with disabilities are the benefits to them are incorporated within the policy framework of affirmative action as well. Question number 2, the government has already put a mechanism in place in order to supervise the reports that will be submitted at the end of this current financial year, that is in 2016. The CSR achievement report that will be submitted to them, that they have already put a framework in place to cross-check, to monitor, and to give us a statement on the substance of the achievement of these companies on their reports.
Well, the final question is, what is the criteria that they are spending on the projects which is approved by the government?
Okay. What is the criteria that they are spending on the projects which is approved by the government? See, the criteria is basically very simple. Ms. Sunita, you'll have to understand that the criteria that you need to invest under which these have to fall is specifically mentioned in Schedule 7. I would request Vineet, if he can send this whole PowerPoint to you, you can highlight, you can actually look into the Schedule 7 components as per the Gazette notification. Your projects have to fall in those 11 or 12 Schedule 7 components of Section 135. If they fall under that, only then it will be considered for the 2% criteria. That's it. That's very simple.
Okay, now Mr. Chakravarti, I'm giving the email ID for Mr. Karunesh Rai. It is KRUNESH.RAI@CII.in.
Right.
For any other queries you have regarding presentation, etc., please write to Karunesh. He will facilitate. And with this, since there are no specific questions, there are only requests to on sharing PPT or something like that, and or thanks, etc., or audio, etc.
Right.
I will now like to thank Mr. Chakravarti for taking his time out and sharing his views on CSR. I know he's a very passionate speaker on affirmative action and CSR. And with this, we close the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vineet, and thank you everyone for sharing your time. Thank you.